So up to this point, we have access modifiers in our object, which controls how we can access these variables or which programs can access these variables. So we had an example here where we created this student. And what is a student? Well, a student is these things, but these things are private and so you can't access them, right? So what we did is we created getters and setters to create these, to access these things. And we demonstrated that you can get these, right? And set them. All right. There's one last thing that we need to learn, and that is about something called the constructor. Okay, so if I could tell you, constructor. Now, what the constructor is it's almost like a method, but it's not technically a method. And what it does is it helps us to set up the object. So what I can do is I can say public, and then it's always like this. It's always public. And it always has to have the same name as the class, right? If you notice, there's no return type because it's not a method. Okay, it's not a function, not a method. It's just a constructor. All right, so we'll give it some parentheses. So you can see it looks a lot like a method, but it's not technically a method. Okay, so we have public student. And what we can do is we can use this to set default values or to do any sort of default operations that we want whenever an object is created. Right, so let's say for instance you had an object and it was in a game or something. Well, as part of its constructor, it might go to a file and load up a certain sprite to give itself an image, right? Or it might go and connect to someplace on a network or something like that. That's what the kind of stuff you would do in the constructor. So as soon as the object's created, you just run this code to help set up the object. All right, so here we have public student. And what we're going to do is we're just going to give some generic stuff. So we're going to say the first name is equal to Jane. Okay, and the last name would be equal to Doe. Okay, so Jane Doe. We'll say the grade is equal to 1, and GPA is equal to 0 to start because there's no GPA to start. All right, so there we go. You don't only just have to put variable declaration stuff in here either. You can put whatever you want. So here I can say system.println student created. Okay, so something like that if I wanted. And when we go to our main program then, we run this, and let's say for instance I don't use any of the setters. Okay, but I do get the first name, the grade, and the GPA. And you can see here, it says student created. That's from the constructor. That's this. All right. And then it says the first name is Wendy, the grade is 1, and the GPA is 2.0. Right? And that looks weird. Do we set the GPA somewhere? Oh, haha. Yeah, the reason why I was confused for a moment is in our previous video, we told the student that it would lie sometimes about this GPA, right? So sometimes if it's failing, half the time it would lie. So if I run this again, it's lying again, lying again. Okay, occasionally it should not lie. It should give the real one. Okay, but let's take this out just because I don't want to have to get any more confusion there. Okay, and so there, our GPA is back to 0.0 as is the default. All right. Whew, just had a heart attack for a moment. I just forgot that I had put that whimsical thing in there. Okay. Anyways, let's continue on. So now we've created a way to set the default values or run some default operations whenever the object's created, and that's just what the constructor does. All right. Now we can, just as we can overload methods, we can also overload the constructor. So instead of saying public student, I could say public student and create another method that's the same, that does the same thing. However, we would have to provide parameters because it follows the same rules for method overloading or function overloading as the constructor overloading does. Okay, so here we have public student, and let's say, for instance, I have string first name. So I want to be able to specify a first name and a string last name. Okay, so something like this. Okay, and then in the body, remember, we would say this first name is equal to first name. Okay, and I would also say something like this, and I'm not, for some reason I put a space there instead of a dot. So this dot last name is equal to last name. Okay, like so. And let's do one more just for fun. Okay, so we can do a full one here. So I can say, I can overload this yet again. So I can say, I also want to provide an integer for a grade and a double for a GPA. So I can specify all these things at the beginning. Okay, so I can say this dot grade is equal to grade, and then I can say this dot GPA is equal to GPA. All right, so it's something like that. So what I've done is I've created 3 different ways of running this object. And instead of having this student created message, I'm going to say constructor1, just to show which constructor is running, to prove that we are actually running different constructors. Okay, so this is going to be constructor 2, and this will be constructor 3. So and actually I'll put one even, here, constructor 1, just so you know, without any parameters, this is known as the default constructor. Okay, so when I create it in this way, I'm providing 0 arguments, and so that's going to run the default constructor, which is constructor 1. Okay, and so you can see it's just Wendy in grade 1 with a 0.0 GPA. All right, let's also just output everything here. So, okay, so this would be get last name. Okay, so we're getting our last name. So this should be Wendy Doe, grade 1, and it's the reason why the name is Wendy is because we set the first name to be Wendy. Let's take this away. Okay, so Jane Doe, grade 1, 0.0 GPA. However, when I create the object, I can specify arguments now. So I can say like Peter and Pan. Okay, so then you have Peter is the first argument, Pan is the second argument, and what the computer will do is it's going to go over here and look for the constructor that matches that. And so it's a string, so that's what this is. It's going to run constructor 2, and now our student's name, when I run this, is Peter Pan. But the rest, because it wasn't specified, stayed the same. Right, so, well, it went to the default values. The default value for an int is 0 and also double 0, so that's why they're both 0 here. Okay, so then what I can do is I can also create this using the third constructor. So I can say Peter Pan is in grade 11. Well, he's always a child, so let's say he's 12. All right, and let's say his GPA is, I don't know, he's probably not very good at school since he never goes to school. So, I don't know, let's say 2. All right, so, or we'll provide a double for it. It would get normally cast anyways, but I'm going to say 2. All right, so we run this. Here we go, constructor 3, it's Peter Pan in grade 12 with a 2.0 GPA. All right, and that is essentially how you work with constructors. It's super simple. It's just the same as methods. So remember, it's not a method. You can never actually call the constructor from the program. So you can never say, so this is called some student. So you could never say some student like this. All right, so you cannot invoke the constructor in this way because it's not a method.